Last year, the Digi60 Filmmakers Festival partnered with local content creator Bernice Romero De Gracia to create and release Wallbreakers, a new podcast focused on breaking down industry barriers. Bernice interviewed several members of Ottawa's filmmaking scene on their creative processes and how they launched careers in the arts. So we decided to turn the tables and ask her about her own creative process and what she learned from her experience working on Wallbreakers, Q&A style. So let's dive in. In your own words, what is Wallbreakers? What kind of goals did you have in mind for it, and do you feel like you achieved them?
This may sound cheesy, but Wallbreakers is honestly a labor of love. She's my baby because from an emerging artist standpoint, it's my very first passion project in media that came into fruition, and things truly fell into place all throughout the production process because as my first media project, I wanted Wallbreakers to be what the arts has always been for me, which is a safe space. But the truth is that with the competitive industry, self-imposed expectations, and insecurities, it doesn't always feel that way. So other than to create a project that would help me get my foot in the door, my goal above everything else was to build a platform that would become a safe space, not just for the guests of my podcast, but for all my listeners. I didn't want it to be a formal interview, and I wanted my listeners to feel like they were in the room with me and my guests. So I really pushed for every episode to be an open conversation in which creatives can freely talk about the inevitable vulnerabilities they face when developing their craft. Rewatching and listening to the episodes now, I believe that I did achieve them and would like to think that I achieved them, and I'm very proud of how everything turned out.
How did Wallbreakers come about, and how did it develop?
This project started when I was undergoing Algonquin College's amazing scriptwriting program. I was looking for a co-op placement, and the program coordinator, Terry Loretto, had suggested a podcast writing opportunity with Digi60. I always wanted to do a podcast, but I never really knew where to start, so I hopped onto the offer right away, and she got me connected with the Digi60 board. Since Digi60's ethos aligns with my creative aspirations and beliefs, I gained a lot of inspiration from their previous podcasts like Film Chats and Filmmakers on Filmmakers. So I wanted to develop a platform that would promote the abundance of global talent in Canada, especially in Ottawa, and dig into how we can break down barriers that hinder people from excelling in a creative career.
As someone who studied communication arts and has experience in scriptwriting, journalism, and multimedia production, how do you think those experiences helped shape and inform your Wallbreakers work?
There were many ways in which I applied what I learned in my communication arts experience to the production of Wallbreakers. Research, especially during the pre-production stage, was crucial so that I could have a solid foundation or blueprint that I could root back to when building this project, like searching for similar podcasts that reflect what I wanted to achieve with Wallbreakers, looking for guests that could contribute meaningful conversations, researching on how I could make audiovisual elements of the podcast cohesive to its overall theme, amongst many other things, and studying up on the equipment and software that can achieve that. A big chunk of my media background comes from writing, though, but podcast writing is completely different from all the other types of writing I've done, but I meshed my writing experience in a way that would tell stories. And looking back on it now, I'd say my guests are my protagonists. So with that, another goal was to write for the podcast in a way that ensures that I let the characters and stories of my guests shine.
What was the production process like, and how did you go about recruiting guests and preparing for the interviews?
When it came to recruiting guests, Digi60 was of really big help in suggesting emerging and established creatives in film and in music that I could invite to the podcast. In this aspect, it all comes down to the nitty-gritty of research. So I made sure to do research on the backgrounds of all of my guests and align the questions that I asked them on each episode to their stories. I also did initial chats through online calls with all of them prior to shooting the episodes, which really helped with breaking the ice and eased us into getting to know each other more.
Did you encounter any roadblocks or challenges along the way?
I'd say everything went to plan overall. Production was smooth sailing. I think the biggest challenge was just finding a shooting schedule that would align with everybody. So it was really important to set a production timeline for the project. One of the biggest things that I learned recently, so even after I finished producing this podcast, was being on time, full time, all the time. So setting an initial timeline that the team and I could refer to helped us stay on track with production while being flexible with making any adjustments along the way when we needed to.
What would you say you learned from the experience?
Through producing Wallbreakers, I definitely brushed up a lot on my post-production and graphic design skills when creating visuals for the podcast, like the cover and its logo. But the biggest skill I learned was being a good host and thinking on the spot to ask relevant questions during each episode while keeping a sense of eloquence. That in particular was challenging, but I'm grateful that I was given that platform to improve on being an eloquent host.
And lastly, do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to share about your experience?
Looking back on the whole journey to bring Wallbreakers to life, it was just such a fruitful journey, and words can't express how grateful I am to Digi60 and to Wallbreakers for being my first media project as a director, producer, and writer. And it really opened me up to the overflowing talent that Canada has to offer. Canadian media and art deserves to be valued more as a vital contributor to Canadian culture and society. So I hope that projects like Wallbreakers continue to bloom in the future and challenge the status quo. My biggest hope is that this reminds creatives, especially emerging creatives, that we are enough and that we have something important to offer to the world, whatever that may be for each individual person.